friends, and welcome to Bad Book Club, where I, Jade, a silly goose with an English degree, read classic and popular literature so you don't have to. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite podcast. I was going to say episode for some reason. Podcast about books with your favorite book nerd, Jade. And this is our last episode of the season, everyone. Isn't that crazy? It's a little crazy to me. I can't believe that I've done like 18 episodes. I've read like 18 books. And I've written like a crazy amount of words for all the scripts that I've done for this podcast. I've learned a lot about what to do in a podcast, a lot about what not to do, a lot of it by trial and error. And I thank you so much for hanging in with me, even when I've been inconsistent or strange, because it's been very helpful and it's been a learning process. And I knew it would be so, but thank you for being understanding. And this podcast has been so fun. By the way, speaking of right now, before our last episode, the podcast has received over 1,000 downloads this season. So that is super exciting to me. 1,000 downloads. I am so grateful and happy that people seem to like what I'm doing. And I'm so grateful to talk to you guys about what's going on. My husband's also very grateful, I'm sure, to you, because before this, he just had to listen to me rant about books. And he was like, yes, Jade, I agree with you. And I was like, but it's ridiculous. And he had to listen to all my analysis about books he hadn't read. And I didn't give him summaries because he doesn't need one. So I'm sure he's very grateful to you too. I've been having the best time. It's such a wonderful podcast. I learned a lot about podcasts this season and a lot of it through trial and error. And next week I'm going to release, this is our last episode of the season, but next week I'm going to release just an update episode about all of the changes that I'm going to be making to season 2, because I will be making some changes. Nothing too big, so don't stress or anything, but I need to adjust the podcast just slightly if I want it to be sustainable for any number of time, because this season I was hard pressed to do everything that I had to do this season for this podcast, because I thought it would be much easier than it was. Silly me. Anyway, I've still had the best time. I thought this would be a fun thing to do in quarantine, and I like it a lot. I would love for the podcast to keep growing. So if you've enjoyed the podcast so far, please subscribe and review us on iTunes. That's the platform that most of the reviews really matter for. Apple Podcasts. If you go to iTunes and you go to podcasts, you see my podcast, you scroll down, it has a review button, and you can just press that and write a review. It's so helpful to me. I read all of your reviews, and I am so thankful to all of you who write one. It means a lot to me. I like seeing that people enjoy the podcast or what they didn't enjoy, and then I can think about that and maybe fix it for you. So it's so helpful to me if you're able to do that. And also, since the podcast is fairly small, if you have a friend that you think would enjoy it, I would super appreciate it if you would just reach out to that friend and maybe send them your favorite episode of this season and say, hey, check out this podcast. I would really appreciate it. Anyway, I don't want to talk for too long. Let's get started on our last episode of season 1. By the way, reminder, season 1's theme was about coming-of-age stories, and in that vein, I've chosen Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So I'm excited to talk about this. Harry Potter is a thing that I've been reading and watching since I was a kid, so I know the book pretty well, but it's been a lot of years since I read it, so it was fun to reread. And it'll be fun to talk to you guys and take you on this little adventure, so let's get started! So the intro sentence of Harry Potter is actually very famous, so I thought I would read it to you. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved with anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. And that's the first episode, oh my gosh, that word is just in my brain, I guess. The first sentence of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It's an adorable book. When I reread it, I remember thinking, no wonder this is famous. It has very general appeal. It's very adorable. The originality is there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just jump into summary. So, the book starts out, actually, with a description of the Dursleys, who live on Privet Drive, as you heard. They have a son named Dudley, who is a terrible tantrum thrower child. And Mr. Dursley goes to work that day and sees strange happenings all around him. He sees people in cloaks, which is strange, celebrating for no reason. One man even hugs him. Also strange are there owls. There are owls just in the daytime flying everywhere for no reason. He's so confused, he doesn't get it. He even sees a cat like just chilling on his street, staring at him. And for a second, he thinks that the cat knows him, but then he's like, that's ridiculous. Cats can't know me. And he has a fairly normal day, and when he's driving home or walking home, I don't know, whatever, he's going home, he hears someone say Harry Potter, and he's concerned for a minute because his wife Petunia has a nephew named Harry Potter that they don't talk about, and he has to tell himself, no, I'm sure it's a different Harry. I'm not even sure if my nephew's name is Harry. What are the odds they're talking about him? Sorry, I thought I heard something. Anyway, what are the odds that they're talking about my Harry Potter, you know? And he goes home and he sees on the news that all these owls are like losing their minds. And he's like, Petunia, have you noticed this? And she's like, And later that night, an old man shows up on the end of their street, and he holds up this tiny gadget, and all the lights from the light posts in the street go into this gadget so it's dark. And he walks up to number 4 Privet Drive and to the cat that's sitting in front of their house, and the cat transforms into an older woman. And this old man says, Professor McGonagall, I should have known you'd be here. So transformed into a cat, no worries, completely normal, obviously. And she asks Dumbledore if it's true. Is it true that Voldemort, or he who must not be named, has disappeared? And she asks this of our old man, who we learn his name is Dumbledore. He says, yes, it's true that Voldemort, or he who must not be named, went to try and kill Mr. and Mrs. Potter and tried to kill their son Harry Potter, but failed. I mean, he succeeded in killing the parents, but he failed at killing the young boy, and he suspects that his power has waned and that he is now in hiding. And he says that the boy is going to live with his aunt and uncle, Mrs. and Mr. Dursley. And McGonagall is like, no, don't put him here. Like, this is terrible. It's awful here. And he's like, they're the only ones who can take him. Like, he has no other family, so he has to be here. And then out of the sky, it's going to sound ridiculous when I say it to you. Out of the sky, this huge man on a motorcycle comes flying down from the sky and lands in front of the house, and he's holding a small bundle. And we learn that this really giant man is named Hagrid, and he is the keeper of keys at a place called Hogwarts, although we'll get there. And he hands this little bundle to Dumbledore, and it's a baby boy who has a lightning scar on his forehead. It's very cute. Hagrid is extremely upset because he doesn't want to give Harry up, so he cries. Hagrid is super adorable. But Dumbledore puts a little letter into the bundle that is Harry and sets him on, Mr. and Mrs. Dursley doorstep, and they all take their leave, and he returns their little lamppost lights. And then the chapter ends with this. He couldn't know that at this very moment, people meeting in secret all over the country were holding up their glasses and saying in hushed voices to Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Now, the next chapter starts 10 years later. This actually very much surprised me. I forgot that this happened in the story. I usually hate when stories jump a huge amount of years later. I think it's really annoying. But I think since this is just we only had the first chapter, if it had gone on for 4 chapters and then we jumped ahead 10 years, I'd be like, excuse me. But since it's only 1 chapter, it's fine. Anyway, we jump ahead 10 years. And today is the Dursleys' son's named Dudley, little fat, annoying boy. It's his birthday today. And so his Aunt Petunia wakes up Harry by slamming on his cupboard door, which he lives underneath the stairs. I am not articulate today. I'm so sorry. I'm laughing to myself because I wrote this all down, and for some reason I'm messing it up while I'm looking at my script. Anyway, basically, Harry Potter lives in the cupboard under the stairs. Petunia bangs on the door to wake him up and says, get up, we have to do things today. It's Dudley's birthday. And he wakes up. He wears Dudley's hand-me-downs. His cupboard is full of spiders. Obviously, his life is not a good one. He goes to make breakfast and stay out of the way. Dudley throws a big tantrum because he doesn't have enough presents. And then they all decide they're going to go to the zoo. Unfortunately, I think their neighbor is supposed to take care of Harry usually when they go places, but she can't this time. So they're like, I guess we can take Harry. And they decide to go to the zoo. While they're at the zoo, Harry and them are walking around and they're in the reptile exhibit, and Harry walks up to like a boa constrictor, and Dudley is all mad. He's not moving, bangs on the glass, and then moves on. Harry starts talking to this boa constrictor. He's like, hey, like, what's life like in Brazil? And he's like, the boa is like, oh, like, I was bred in captivity. Now, the boa doesn't talk to him per se. It's more like he like motions his head a little bit. Like, it does talk to him, but like not like too much. But anyway, Dudley sees that the snake is moving around. He runs up, pushes Harry to the ground, and suddenly the glass disappears out from under Dudley's hands, and the boa escapes. And the Dudleys are super angry about this. They blame Harry, even though Harry's like, how could I have done something like that? And they shove him into the cupboard for like a while. They're like, no meals for a week or whatever, which is terrible. Sorry, excuse me. I learned while reading this that I didn't notice that the Dudleys are like very abusive to Harry. Like, it's not just that he has like a bad life. It's that they are like almost abusive. Like, withholding meals is like not a thing that you should do. And Harry talks about how he has to wait for his uncle to fall asleep so he can sneak out and like eat something out of the fridge. And that's just like so sad. I never realized exactly how abusive they are because they kind of downplay it in the movies. Like they treat him poorly, but they don't like treat him abusively in the movies. I think because it's supposed to be for kids, and like viewing it on the screen, I think would be darker than reading it here. But anyway, let's move on. Anyway, they punish him for that, and they're like, oh, we'll go in the cupboard. And Harry's like, fine, whatever. He tells us that he's not supposed to ask his like aunt and uncle questions about anything strange, and they just don't like questions at all. So he doesn't know much about himself, his past, his parents, nothing. He also says that he's super excited for the summer to be over because Dudley is going to like a private school and Harry is going to a different school, and he's very excited to go to a different school. That morning, Mr. Dursley asks him to grab the mail, and Harry does, and finds a letter in there addressed to Mr. Harry Potter, the cupboard under the stairs. And it's like this beautiful paper, envelope, whatever, and he's opening it as he's walking by, and unfortunately, he's so distracted, he doesn't notice that the Dursleys have seen him do this, and they take the letter, they read it themselves, and they destroy it, and they're really upset about it. Over the next couple days, letters start arriving more regularly, and on Sunday, a ton of letters come flooding in through the house, through like every nook and cranny, like letters everywhere. Even though they moved Harry to a different bedroom, all of them are addressed correctly to now the smallest bedroom at Privet Drive. So all these letters are coming in. They're not letting Harry read any of them. Mr. Dursley's like burning them. It's very interesting. He like nails the mail slot shut on the door. What else does he do? Oh, and then when all those letters come flooding in, he's like, we're going to go to a hotel where they can't find us. And they go to a hotel, but letters come in there too. So he takes it a step further. On the eve of Harry's 11th birthday, they go to like this rickety shack in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of an island, and they hide out there. And they're there that night. They're super hungry because none of them have eaten. And then suddenly this big boom comes and the door is knocked down and a huge man is standing there. And he introduces himself as Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts, and delivers the letter to Harry. Now, the Dursleys are super upset about this. They say he's not going to the school, like it's not a thing. And Harry's like, what is going on? And eventually it's all explained. What we learn is that, in fact, they have told Harry that his parents died in a car crash. Hagrid is very upset about this. He says they died in a car crash. That wouldn't kill them. And Harry learns that he is a wizard. He learns that he's a wizard, his parents were wizards, and that Petunia hated her sister for this. She said her family was super proud. She was the only one to see that her sister was a freak, and Harry would never be a part of that life, so they're going to keep him from it. And Hagrid's like, well, I'm supposed that a great muggle like you is going to stop him. Muggle means non-magic person, which he tells Harry. And then more story comes out. Hagrid tells Harry about Voldemort, the wizard who must not be named, and how he was a dark wizard and turned a bunch of people over to his side, and how like they were growing in power. He was attacking a bunch of people, and he went to killed his parents. And when he tried to kill Harry, something happened and it didn't work, and it hurt Voldemort. And some people think he's dead, but Hagrid just thinks he's gone in hiding. And he is the boy who lived. Harry Potter is very famous as the boy who lived. And Harry's like, I'm just Harry. I'm not like a wizard. And he's like, yeah, you are though. And the Dursleys are super mad about this. And in retaliation, Hagrid puts like a pigtail onto Dudley's backside, which is super funny, with his little like umbrella. And he tells Harry he's not supposed to be performing magic, so don't tell anyone about that. But it was pretty funny. They stay there that night and they leave the next morning. Oh, by the way, I forgot this. Hagrid also gives Harry a birthday cake that he made himself that says Happy Birthday Harry on it, which is super cute. So, Harry wakes up the next day and realizes that it wasn't a dream. Hagrid is still here, and they are going to go and pick up Harry's school supplies for Hogwarts together. It's very adorable. He's super excited to go. We also learned that Hagrid, the reason why he's not supposed to do magic that he mentioned to Harry is that he was expelled from Hogwarts, although we don't know why. Hagrid also sends a letter to Dumbledore via owl that he pulls from his little pocket, all rumpled, and writes a note and sends the owl off with the letter. An owl also comes in that morning, and like Harry has to pay the owl, and the owl gives him a letter, and it's just like the paper, I believe. And anyway, he and Hagrid zoom off in a boat from the island, leaving the Dursleys behind. And Harry is concerned because he's like, Hagrid, I don't have any money to buy like supplies for school. And Hagrid is like, no, your parents left you money. They left you money at a place called Gringotts Bank, which is run by goblins. Hagrid tells Harry that Gringotts is essentially impossible to break into, and he definitely has like a family fortune waiting for him. Their first stop is in London, and Harry's like, where are we going to find all this in London? And Hagrid's like, we'll know where to find it. And anyway, they stop in London at a place called the Leaky Cauldron, which is a pub, and all of the people in there recognize Harry, and they like trip over themselves, excited to meet him. They're like, you're Harry Potter, the boy who lived. And Harry gets his first like dose of how he actually is very famous and people know him, and it's very surprising to him. He even recognizes one man who once bowed to him when he was younger and he didn't know why, and the man's like, he recognized me. He also meets a man called Professor Quill. He has a stutter and he has a turban wrapped around his head, and he is the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts. Anyway, they leave from the Leaky Cauldron and they go out into the street. Hagrid taps a brick on a wall, and a small street called Diagon Alley opens in front of them. The bricks all move apart. Hagrid explains that Harry will buy everything he needs on Diagon Alley, which, by the way, if you put together, spells diagonally, which is a cute pun. Inside of Gringotts, they are escorted down to the vaults, and they go through these little carts, which are like, the whole place apparently is like a labyrinth. It's run by goblins, and you have to sit in a little cart, and the goblins will take you to the vault for your whatever bank that you're doing, whatever. And they open up Harry's vault, and he has a ton of gold in there left to him by his parents. He has a virtual fortune. They also stop at another vault, and Hagrid removes something from this vault. It's an empty vault. Hagrid removes something in there and says that it's for Dumbledore. The vault is 713, by the way. So anyway, and Harry asks about it, but Hagrid's like, can't tell you anything about what this is. Hagrid and Harry go to be fitted for his school uniform, and inside there's like this blonde and like kind of rude boy who's in there. He says his name is Draco Malfoy. He claims that like none of like the Muggle students should be going to Hogwarts. It's like super rude. And Harry is super thankful when he leaves. He's like, oh, good thing that kid's gone. They buy books for potions and all those things. We also learned that apparently first years are not allowed to have their own broomsticks. We're not quite sure what that means, but they're not allowed to have their own broomsticks. And they stop by a wand store. And Harry is doing his wand like this. The wand store is called Mr. Ollivander's Wands. And apparently the wand chooses the owner, I guess. And Harry has to choose his wand. During his time shopping, too, by the way, before I get into Ollivander's wands, Hagrid gives him a white owl as a gift for a birthday, which is so cute of Hagrid. His name, the owl's name, stuttering all over today. The owl's name is Hedwig, and she is a white owl, and the owls deliver mail at Hogwarts, and the students are all required to have a familiar, I guess. So that is Harry's little familiar. And anyway, they're in Ollivander's now. Harry is testing wands. Some of them are being strange, like doing weird things, breaking stuff every time he holds them. Mr. Ollivander's running around giving him wands to test out. And eventually he holds up one wand and kind of there's like this little moment where everything is like, I don't know, like nice or whatever. And the wand like reacts to him, obviously. And the wand has chosen him. And Mr. Ollivander acts a little odd. He's like, that's very curious. And Harry's like, what's curious? And he says this. Mr. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave another feather. Just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand, when its brother, gave you that scar. Harry swallowed. Yes, 13.5 inches. You. Curious indeed how these things happened. The wand chooses the wizard, remember. I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, but great. After shopping all day, Harry and Hagrid walk to the train station, and Hagrid puts Harry on a train, homeward bound, and says, on the 1st of September, here's your train ticket for platform 9 3/4. And Harry says, Hagrid, everyone is famous. Like, I don't know anything. And Hagrid's like, it's okay. Everyone starts off on the same, like bit at Hogwarts. Like, it's fine. You're going to learn. And Harry turns around to say bye to Hagrid, and he's gone. The next chapter starts about a month later. Harry's month has not gone well with the Dursleys. And his uncle, Vernon, by the way, is his first name. He asks him to take him to the train station tomorrow so he can go to school. And Vernon's like, all right, we have to go anyway because Dudley has to go to the hospital to try and cut the pigtail off of his butt, which is so funny. And they arrive that day at the train station. Harry has all of his supplies. And Vernon kind of taunts him. He's like, platform 9 3/4, huh? Good luck finding it. And kind of abandons him. And Harry is so confused because there's only platforms 9 and 10, no platform 9 3/4. He asks a policeman who's like, thinking you're having a laugh, hilarious joke, and walks away. But Harry sees like this family walk by. They're all holding like little carts like him. They have like animals like him. And he hears them say the word muggles. And he's like, oh, muggles, like that. They must be who I want to go to. And he follows them, and they're all like a big redheaded family. There's like 5 of them. And she tells like the 2 older twins to go through to platform 9 3/4, and they run at a wall and disappear. Harry asks the lady what to do, what's going on. She says, are you going to Hogwarts, platform 9 3/4? Just run at the wall and you'll be there. And she says, by the way, this is like Ron, who's your age. We also see a small sister named Jenny, and those older 2 brothers, Fred and George. And then there's an older brother named Percy. Anyway, Harry runs at the wall and then finds himself at a separate train station. Like magic. What? And he's at platform 9 3/4, and the train is destined for Hogwarts. On the train, Harry takes a seat in like a little compartment, and the same redheaded kid, Ron Weasley, sits down next to him. They have a whole discussion where Ron realizes that he's Harry Potter, and Harry shows him the scar on his forehead, and he's like, you don't remember anything? And Harry's like, no, I remember like a flash of green light, and that's it, like I was a baby. And Ron's like, wow, that's so cool. They're on the train. They're headed to Hogwarts. A lady comes by with snacks. She's like, do you guys want any snacks? And Ron's like, no, I have a sandwich, and it looks really terrible. And Harry's like, I'll take it all. And he pulls out a ton of gold, and he and Ron kind of gorge themselves on candy, which is super cute. And there are a couple magical like things about the candy. So there's like jelly beans who are like every flavor, including like earwax and vomit, which is terrible. There's also these things called chocolate frogs, and they come with pictures of teachers at Hogwarts, and their pictures will disappear and move around, which is pretty cool. And also Ron shows him his pet rat named Scabbers, who he says is completely useless. He tries a spell on the rat, which doesn't work. And then around this time, a girl comes by named Hermione, who says, hey, have you seen a toad? A boy named Neville has lost a toad. And they're like, no. She sees her doing magic, and she's very know-it-all. And she says, let's see the spell. And he tries. It doesn't work. Hermione takes out her little wand, and she fixes Harry's glasses with her spell. Tells them that they should change into cloaks. Then tells Ron he's got dirt on his face. And then she leaves. Pretty funny. We also learn that at Hogwarts, there are these things called houses. It's like 4 groups, and you get sorted into your group when you get there. Ron's family is all Gryffindors, and we also learned that all of the people who joined Voldemort were from the house called Slytherin. So you don't want to be in that one, says Ron. Also, right around this time, we see Draco Malfoy, the blonde kid from when Harry was getting his robes done, comes in with 2 men behind him, 2 boys named Crabbe and Goyle. And he's like, hey, like, you shouldn't go around making friends with the wrong sort, Harry Potter. And Harry's like, I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself. And they're like, well, fine, we'll just steal all your food then. And when they try to steal their food and reach forward, Scabbers the rat jumps forward, bites them, and they're like, ah, and they run out. They arrive at Hogwarts, and Hagrid meets all the first years at the little platform, takes them to a bunch of boats, and they take these boats toward a huge castle that's Hogwarts. In these boats, that one kid, Neville, finds his toad, and Hagrid walks them up to the castle doors. Hagrid walks in the first years, and they see an older witch in emerald robes, and Hagrid refers to her as Professor McGonagall. So this is the same woman who was once a cat, who sat outside Harry's family's home, by the way, just in case you didn't get it. And they're told that they're going to wait so that they can go into the sorting ceremony so they can be sorted into their houses. They don't know what this entails. Ron says his older brothers told him that it hurts a lot, but he thinks they're joking, which is pretty funny. And then McGonagall leads them through the Great Hall, where all the kids are seated at 4 long tables for each of the houses. And they look up at the ceiling, and it looks like the night sky, and apparently it's bewitched like that, says Hermione. And they also see ghosts flying around everywhere. Apparently, each little house has kind of a ghost to represent them, which is kind of funny. And they're walked to the front, and McGonagall puts this hat onto like this little witch's hat onto like a stool, and the hat begins to sing about how it's called a sorting hat. Each of the first years steps forward, the hat is placed on their head, and then the hat announces to the room what house they're going to be sorted into. Harry watches the hat sort a bunch of houses, and then it gets to Ron, and it says Gryffindor, and they're like really excited. And it gets to Hermione, and they also say Gryffindor, and then Malfoy also comes up, and they say Slytherin, so that makes sense. There's also 2 other houses, Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, but to be honest, they don't do much ever, really, so it doesn't matter that much. Basically, the only 2 houses that make a difference or have any story is Gryffindor and Slytherin. Anyway, Harry sits down for the sorting hat, and the sorting hat is put on his head, and Harry's like thinking to himself, he's like, please don't put me in Slytherin. And the hat responds. He says, you don't want to be in Slytherin? Like, you could be great, but like, I can see it in your future. Like, you could have a great Slytherin, future. And Harry's like, please no. And the hat is like, okay, if not Slytherin, then Gryffindor. And everyone like just bursts into applause because the Gryffindor house just got the boy who lived, Harry Potter. Everyone is super, super excited about that. And all the rest of the houses are really annoyed because they didn't get the really famous boy. So that's pretty funny. After all the kids are sorted, an older man stumbles onto the stage. He doesn't stumble. That's just me being silly. But he does slowly walk onto the stage. He says hello to all the first years. He says, I'd like to say a couple words. These are the words he says. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. Thank you. And he sits down, and Harry's like, is he a bit crazy? And they're like, yeah, just a bit, but he's a really, really amazing wizard, so he's got that going for him. And there's this huge feast that appears on these gold plates in the middle of the table, and they sing a song about Hogwarts. And Harry meets a ghost called Nearly Headless Nick because he was almost fully decapitated, but not really. So anyway, Harry also looks at some of the teachers who are gathered at the front table. And when he sees this older gentleman who has black hair and black robes, the scar on his forehead like burns for a minute. And he asks who that is. And I think it's Percy who responds that that is Professor Snape. He's in charge of potions, but everyone knows he wishes that he was the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Dumbledore also tells them that there are a couple things that are off limits to first years, such as a hallway where please don't go there or else you'll die a terrible, painful death. And all the kids are like, okay, which is pretty silly. Lastly, we meet Peeves, who is the poltergeist, I believe, for a Slytherin house. I don't know. And he's a really annoying ghost, so we learned that. Percy, the head boy, walks the Gryffindor first years to their dorms, and there's a painting, and all the paintings are moving, by the way, all of them. They move around, they say hi to the people walking by. The staircases occasionally move as they walk, and they reach a big portrait of a fat lady, and Percy says, Capus Draconis, and the portrait swings open, and the Gryffindors go through a hole in the wall, and they enter their dorms, so they have to have the password right, which is something we learn. And Harry and Ron go to sleep, their luggage has already been taken up, and it's been a long day, so they sleep. Then we have Harry's description of his first day at Hogwarts. As he walks around, people are whispering a lot about him. Ron and him walk around together. Peeves the ghost is apparently terribly annoying. Some of his classes are boring, whatever. Harry gets a note from Hagrid asking if he wants to have tea later, and he goes to potions class with Professor Snape, who is, as we learn, kind of the head of the Slytherin house. Like, that's his job. We also learn, by the way, I forgot to mention this, that throughout the year, points are awarded to certain members of certain houses, and at the end of the year, the points are calculated, and whichever house has the most points is the winner of the House Cup. And there's like a feast in their honor, and it's a big deal. Teachers have the ability to give or take away points. Just so you know, the points are an important part of the story. Anyway, he goes to potions. Professor Snape is not a fan of Harry at all. He calls out Harry in the middle of class, says that like being famous won't help him, like subtracts 10 points from him because he didn't know the answer to something. Just hates him, obviously, and Harry is very perturbed. When he goes to see Hagrid later that day, he tells him, and Hagrid's like, don't worry about it. That's ridiculous. And it seems that he kind of brushes it off too quickly. And while they're there, Harry also notices a paper that Hagrid has received that says that Gringotts Vault 713 was broken into later that same day that Harry and Hagrid had visited it. So someone had broken into Gringotts and looked in that vault that he and Hagrid had been in. Hagrid still refuses to tell Harry what was in the vault, though. Oh, Ron also joins them for this trip, but he doesn't really say anything except sits there and is like, yes, interesting. By the way, I forgot to mention, the reason why people don't try to rob Gringotts is because if you try to rob it and you're the wrong person and you walk in, the dungeon will close on you and you'll die. So many people don't attempt to rob Gringotts. It is very surprising that someone tried to rob it. And obviously they were after the thing that Hagrid had. We move on to the next chapter. By the way, the chapters move fairly quickly. I'm going to save most of my analysis for the end, just get through the summary. Anyway, we move on to the next chapter, and Harry talks about how much he does not like Draco Malfoy. For example, the first years have their first Quidditch lesson. What is Quidditch, Jade? Quidditch, as explained to Harry by Ron, is this game that wizards play where they sit on broomsticks, remember broomsticks, and the broomsticks fly, and they play this game where they have to keep the balls out of hoops. It's kind of like basketball, but you're on broomsticks, and also balls fly around and try to hit you while you're on the broomsticks. Anyway, flying a broomstick is a very key component of being a wizard, so they have a class all about it, even though first years aren't allowed to own their own broomsticks. During this class, Harry is nervous for it. Everyone is nervous for it. And earlier that day, they had been sitting in the Great Hall for breakfast, and everyone's mail had arrived. And that boy who lost his toad, Neville, received this cool ball from his grandma. And the smoke inside the ball will turn red whenever he forgets something. That morning, Draco tried to snatch it out of his hand, and a teacher stopped him, and he had to give it back. But later during the Quidditch session, Neville's broom kind of goes amiss when he's getting on and flies off, and Neville hits the wall, falls down, and breaks his wrist. And the professor has to take him away. Draco steals Neville's Remember-All and is like, yeah, I have it. And Harry's like, give it back, Draco. And Draco's like, whatever, catch me if you can. And Draco gets on his broom and flies away. They're not supposed to be doing this. If they do this, they could be expelled. But Harry gets on his own broomstick, despite Hermione's urging, and follows Draco up into the air, which is very surprising because Draco has done this before and Harry has not. Everyone is amazed that Harry's able to do this. As soon as he approaches Draco on the broomstick, Draco obviously was not prepared for this, and he throws the Remember-All, which Harry chases. nearly hits the ground, but catches the ball, and all his teammates are very excited that he has, defended Neville in this way. Unfortunately, Professor McGonagall sees this exchange, tells Harry Potter to follow her immediately, because never in her life has she seen this happen at Hogwarts. She walks Harry with her. Harry's certain he's going to be expelled, but she stops by a classroom and asks to see Wood. His name is Wood. I forget his first name, but anyway, she's like, come with me. Oliver Wood, that's his name. I think I found you a seeker for the Gryffindor Quidditch team. So it's really cute. Instead of expelling him, she wants the first year to play on the team, which usually doesn't happen. But since he developed, showed such skill outside and she saw him catch that ball, she thinks Harry would be perfect for it. She says that he's going to practice with Wood and that McGonagall hopes that it goes well. She also says that his father would be proud of him because he was also a Quidditch player. Later that day, Hermione and Ron are super shocked at this, very excited for Harry. And Fred and George are like, yeah, you did it. And also, Malfoy challenges Harry to a wizard's duel that night. And unfortunately, they're not allowed to leave their dorms at night, but they agree to it anyway. Hermione comes across them. By the way, at this point in the book, Hermione's not really their friend yet. She's more like their hall monitor. And she sees them trying to sneak out. She tries to stop them, but the little portrait swings closed and the lady's not there, so they can't get back in. So they go to this duel anyway. Malfoy has set them up, and the caretaker, Mr. Finch, and his cat are waiting for them. They run away trying to escape the caretaker, who knows that someone's out of bed but doesn't know who it is. And they accidentally go into this room that Hermione unlocks for them. And in this room is a huge 3-headed dog who almost kills them, and eventually they make it back to the dorms. Malfoy is super shocked that they're still at the school and wasn't found out the next day. But Harry and Ron and Hermione are like, whatever, outsmarted and blah. And Harry receives his wand that day, the Nimbus 2000, but he's told not to open it in front of the school because he's not allowed to have a broom, technically. And he and Wood meet to talk about Quidditch. We learn that to be a seeker, basically Harry's whole job is to follow this tiny little gold ball around and try and catch that ball during the game. That's his only thing. There's the big quaffle ball, which people have to shoot through hoops, and then there are 2 balls who fly around just trying to hit people on their broomsticks. And Fred and George are supposed to keep those balls away from their team. And Harry's job is literally just to catch the tiniest, smallest little ball, and he does it with Wood, and it's going well, so that's good. We skip to some sort of class that they're in later that day, or not that day, or just sometime, another class on another day. And Harry and Ron and Hermione are all trying to make this feather, float into the air. Hermione's really bossy with Ron about how to say, I forget the word. I don't know. It's some sort of spell. And she's like, no, it's Leviosa, not Leviosa. And she puts the feather up, and it's really embarrassing to Ron and Harry. And as they're walking out, Ron kind of badmouths Hermione. He's like, no wonder she doesn't have any friends. And she runs off crying, which is very sad. Later at the feast, Quirrell comes running in to say that there's a troll in the dungeons, and then he immediately faints. Everyone falls into chaos. There's a troll in the building, and they're all escorted out by Percy. But Harry turns to Ron and says, wait, Hermione's not here. Because before they had gotten to the feast, someone told them that Hermione had been crying in the girls' bathroom all day, and she did not know that there was a troll. So they go running and they try to find Hermione, but they see the troll passing by and they're hide. And they see a troll walk into a room and they lock that room closed. And then they hear a scream and they're like, oh no, what room was that? And it was the girls' bathroom. So they have to run back and try and save Hermione. While they're in there, there's this huge stinking troll. He has a club. Apparently, it's confusing about why the troll or how the troll got into the school because they're really dumb. So he couldn't have gotten him in himself. And Hermione is running away and screaming and very scared. I think actually she's not running. She's frozen from fear. And the troll's about to hit her with her club. And Ron, using the information Hermione gave him, said Leviosa, and the little club stayed in the air. And then Harry accidentally shoves a wand up his nose, and then the club falls down, hits the troll on the head, knocks him out. Anyway, it's a whole thing. It's kind of short, but it's a little scary. The professors come upon them, and Hermione claims that she tried to go after the troll herself so that Ron and Harry wouldn't get in trouble. And McGonagall is disappointed, takes points away from Gryffindor. By the way, Gryffindor is her own house too. She's the leader of Gryffindor, so she's sad to do that. But the troll has been taken care of. By the way, when it comes to points being taken or given away, usually the teachers stick around 5 to 10, so McGonagall takes away 5 points from Gryffindor for their actions. Anywho, the three of them are cemented into a friendship now after that. It's written, from that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. In the next chapter, we get Harry's first Quidditch game. Oliver Wood has kept Harry kind of secret so that he could be a secret weapon, and they go to his first Quidditch match. Harry has Hermione and Ron to support him. We kind of switch to Hermione and Ron's perspective at this moment. Hagrid is also there, and they notice that Snape is limping, and they're like, you know what this means? He tried to get past the three-headed dog that night that the troll was here, so that's what they assume. By the way, a while back, I think I forgot to tell you, the friends figured out that the three-headed dog was guarding like a trap door, so they figure that that's the package that Hagrid took from Vault 713, and that Snape wants whatever is in that trap door. Anyway, they watch Harry play his first game. It's going pretty well, except for the fact that Harry, all of a sudden, after he starts to see the snitch, like his wand starts to freak out. And Hermione is like, oh, someone's like spelling his broom. He's going to fall and die. And she looks behind her, and she sees Snape not breaking eye contact and mumbling to himself, which she says is the same thing as, like, what is required if one is going to spell, like, an item. So she goes behind the bleachers, sets fire to Snape's cloak, distracts him, and Harry's able to get back on the broom. And as he glides toward the ground, he falls off his broom, and he stands in the middle of the field. Everyone is watching as he spits up the snitch, which he accidentally caught with his mouth, and Gryffindor wins. Also, we learn that Hagrid is covering for something. They try to ask Hagrid, like, what was in that package, and Hagrid is apparently terrible at secrets, and he's like, whatever's in that package is between Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. So they're like, oh, it has something to do with Nicholas Flamel, and he's like, no, and he stalks off all, like, upset with himself because he accidentally said something. In the next chapter, we get Christmas time, and Harry decides to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas. Same with Ron, because his parents went to visit his oldest brother, Charlie, who's in Romania and working with dragons. So they decide to stay together at Hogwarts, and Harry wakes up at Christmas morning, and he has presents for him, which has never happened before. Ron says that his mom made him like a little sweater, too, that says it has a big H on it, which is very adorable. And they open presents, and one of the presents that Harry opens is this package that has a mysterious note on it that says, your father left this in my possession when he died. It's time that it's returned to you. And he opens it up, and Ron and him realize it's an invisibility cloak. And they are astounded. They're like, whoa, that's so cool. So if he puts on this cloak, he is invisible. Anyway, there's a big Christmas feast, and it's very fun, and they fall asleep that night, and Harry decides that he is going to try out his new invisibility cloak to go look in the restricted section of the library to see if he can find anything about Nicholas Flamel. The kids have been working for a while trying to find out who that is, looking through books in the library, but unfortunately they haven't been able to find anything about him. So he's like, I can go to the restricted section if I wear this cloak. So he goes to the restricted section holding like a little lamp in front of him, and he opens up a book, and the book screams and calls attention to him in the restricted section. Filch, the caretaker, hears the scream, comes running. Harry is in his invisibility cloak. Filch grabs a professor. It turns out to be Professor Snape. He's like, you told me to tell you if there's like anyone in the restricted section. So Snape is there. Harry sneaks past them and runs into this little side room where he sees a mirror. The mirror is labeled as the Mirror of Erised. And as Harry looks into the mirror, he sees his parents standing behind him, and he's entranced. The next day, he tells Ron about it, and he and Ron go to see the mirror. And when Ron looks in the mirror, Ron sees him standing, and he's head boy of Gryffindor himself. Ron sees himself standing. And he's head boy of Gryffindor. He has the house cup. Everyone's chanting his name. And he can't see, when Harry's looking in the mirror, Harry's parents. So something is up with this mirror. It's definitely magical. For the next couple nights, Harry goes and sits in front of the mirror. And one night, Dumbledore comes up behind him and says, Harry, like, I've noticed you've come here the last couple nights. And Harry's like, yeah. And Dumbledore talks with him, and he says, have you figured out what the mirror does? And Harry's like, well, it shows me my family. And then it shows Ron being head boy. And Dumbledore says that, like, for example, if the happiest man in the world stood in front of the mirror, he would see himself just as he is. And Harry's like, it shows you what you want. And Dumbledore's like, yes, it shows you your inner desires. Like, you want to be with your family. Ron wants to be, individual and accomplished. He says people would waste away in front of the mirror looking at their desires. So please don't do this. Live life that's worth living. The mirror won't be here tomorrow. Please don't come back. And Harry's like, okay. In the next chapter, Hermione, Ron, and Harry are feeling like, meh, we can't find anything about Nicholas Flamel. This is super frustrating. They also learn that Snape is supposed to referee the next Quidditch game, which is not good since he was trying to spell Harry last time. They're like, oh no, that's no good. They're like, pretend you have broken your leg, don't go. Harry's like, I'm the only seeker on the team. I have to go. And anyway, he plays the game and Dumbledore shows up. So they're like, wow, Dumbledore is here. Snape can't do anything if Dumbledore is here. And they play the game. Harry catches the snitch. Yay! And they win because he caught the snitch. Dumbledore's proud of him, gives him a little pat on the back. Snape is upset, spits on the floor. And they're like, yay, Harry, you did it. You won. Yay. But they also find out who Nicholas Flamel is. Hermione realizes that she knew she read the name before. It was in just a regular book that she checked out for light reading. It's huge. And in it says Nicholas Flamel is the maker of something called the Sorcerer's Stone. With the Sorcerer's Stone, you can turn anything into gold and you can live forever. So they're like, wow, that must be what the dog is guarding. And who wouldn't want to live forever? Snape must be up after that. After the Quidditch game, though, Harry leaves the locker room and sees a hooded figure, moving away from the castle. Harry follows him, and he takes up on his broom and flies so the person can't see him, hides in a tree, and he watches Snape and Professor Quirrell, have, a heated argument where Snape is like, I thought you'd want to keep this private. Students aren't supposed to know about the Sorcerer's Stone. And he's like, have you found out how to get past the beast that Hagrid's yet? And Quirrell's like, no, I haven't. And he's like, Severus, but I don't know what you want. And he's like, you know perfectly well what I mean. Obviously Snape is intimidating Quirrell here. And Harry's like, oh no. And he tells about his friends, and they're like, well, so you're saying the stone is only safe as long as Quirrell stands up to Snape. And they're like, well, that's no good then, because Quirrell is a stuttering, scared person, and Snape is very scary. So that's not good at all. In the next chapter, we get this bit about Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback, which is a type of dragon. So let me explain it fairly shortly because it only takes one chapter, so I'll explain it the best I can. Basically, they are studying in the library for finals, and they see Hagrid walk by with a book about dragons. And they're like, why is he checking out a book about dragons? And anyway, they go to check on Hagrid, and he's heating something over the fireplace, and Harry remembers that Hagrid has always wanted a dragon, and he says, Hagrid, is that a dragon egg? And Hagrid says, yes. And Ron is like, Hagrid, where did you get it? Isn't it super expensive? And Hagrid says that he won it off of a stranger in a pub who wore his cloak the whole time and seemed glad to be rid of it. And they watch as this egg is hatched, and the Norwegian Ridgeback dragon is there, and Hagrid names him Norbert, and Hagrid says he's going to raise Norbert, and they're like, how big do they get? You're not supposed to have a dragon. And Draco is peering through the curtains of Hagrid's home and sees them, and they're like, whatever, just let him run off. But since he saw the dragon, we have to get the dragon out of here. It's getting big really fast. It's getting scary. He's going to breathe fire. Hagrid is adorable. He's like, he's just a little boy. And he's very scary. In any case, Ron writes to his brother and says, can you send someone to pick up this Norwegian Ridgeback that I have? Because remember, Ron's brother works with dragons. And he says, yes, tomorrow night in the tower. So the kids sneak out of bed, they take the dragon up the stairs, and Charlie's friend grabs a dragon from them and runs off. Draco tells McGonagall that this is happening. I believe it's McGonagall. Yeah, and McGonagall finds them in the tower and is like, how dare you? She removes points from Gryffindor and Slytherin because even though, Draco, you came to us with this information, you're also out of bed, and sentences them to detention. Unfortunately, the really bad thing is not only that points were taken away, but 50 points each was taken away. So Hermione, Ron, and Harry lost Gryffindor 150 points. So everyone is super mad at them, which sucks. So in any case, they have to go to detention. They learn that detention is helping Hagrid in the Forbidden Forest, which Draco is like, my father won't allow this. And Hagrid is like, why don't you call him? And we'll tell him all about what you did. And Draco's like, fine, I'll go, I guess. And it's because they need to walk around the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid because there's been unicorn blood found here, and something is hurting unicorns in the forest, and that's really bad because unicorns are innocent and like their blood is precious, and whoever kills a unicorn is just like an evil person. So they need to find who's doing this. And they go through the woods. Hagrid separates them to two groups, Neville and Draco. Neville's kind of involved in this. Basically, he overheard the dragon story, and he also got in trouble just like a little bit, so he has to be in detention. And Neville goes with Draco and Hagrid's dog, Fang, and Hagrid goes with Harry and Hermione and Ron. But while they're walking around, they hear a scream, they come running. Draco frightened Neville, so he's like, Harry, why don't you go with Draco, because I know that Draco won't scare you while you're out and about. And Harry's like, all right, fine, whatever. And he goes with Draco and Fang, and they run into some sort of hooded figure. Oh, by the way, sorry, before the hooded figure, while they were walking around, they came across centaurs. Yeah, some centaurs. And Hagrid was like, hello, centaurs. He's like, have you seen anything strange? And they're like, well, the stars are aligned in a certain way. And they're being very vague, only talking about stars and destiny. And Hagrid's like, thanks for your help. And he's like, don't ask centaurs questions. Anyway, back to the original story. They're walking through the forest, and Draco and Harry see this hooded figure drinking blood from a unicorn. And they're like, what is that? And the hooded figure kind of approaches Harry, and a centaur leaps out of the forest and kind of runs the figure away and rescues Harry, puts Harry on his back. I think Draco ran away. Puts Harry on his back and takes him back to his group. And the centaur kind of implies that, like, destiny is against Harry Potter. Like, they're like, Harry's destiny is not good. Like, that's what's implied by that. And he also tells him that to drink unicorn blood is a half-life because you've taken something pure, but it will keep you alive. So whoever was drinking that blood, like, really needed it. And they leave the forest. Oh, and we also learn that the centaurs hint that it was Voldemort who was doing that, because who else would need to do something like that? And yep, it's super spooky. So now Voldemort might be out and about. And before all this, too, they're still worried about Snape and Quirrell because, by the way, they're still after the Sorcerer's Stone. And who do you think wants the Sorcerer's Stone if they're around? Voldemort. So Snape must be working with Voldemort. In the next chapter, we have something called Through the Trap Door. Basically, during exams, everyone still hates them, and they do exams, they get through it. And Harry is worried the whole time that Voldemort's going to come in and, like, kill everybody. He's very stressed. But basically, he also realizes that he's going to get through that trap door and he's going to find the Sorcerer's Stone, and they have to stop him because who else is going to stop him? But he also realizes something else. He can't believe he didn't realize it before. Isn't it strange that a cloaked figure comes along with a dragon egg when Hagrid has always wanted one? It can't be a coincidence. So he goes to talk to Hagrid, and Hagrid tells him, yeah, he won the egg off of a stranger in the pub. And the stranger asked him, how are you good with beasts? Like, how do you get beasts to calm down? And he's like, well, with beasts like Fluffy, the three-headed dog, if you play a bit of music, he'll fall right to sleep. And the kids realize that Hagrid has given away how to get past Fluffy. So that means that someone is going to attack Fluffy, like, not attack him, but get through Fluffy soon. And then they realize they have to tell Dumbledore. So they go running, and they find Professor McGonagall, and they say, hey, Snape is going to try and get to the Sorcerer's Stone through Fluffy. We have to talk to Dumbledore. And she says, Dumbledore has been called by the Ministry of Magic, and he is not here now. And so the kids look at each other and realize that it has to happen tonight. And McGonagall is like, I don't know how you know all this, but rest assured that the stone is well protected. And the kids are like, I don't think so. We have to go help. So later that night, the kids sneak out to go and save the Sorcerer's Stone. Unfortunately, while they're sneaking out, they run into Neville, who says that he won't let them, take more points away from Gryffindor by sneaking out. Unfortunately, Hermione's like, Neville, I'm really sorry, but Petrificus Totalis, and Neville's whole body goes stiff, and he falls like a board, and they go past him, and they run to Fluffy, where they find that, I believe, a harp is sitting there, so someone has already been there. And Harry remembers this flute that Hagrid gave him, and he starts playing music for Fluffy, and he falls asleep, and they go past him in the trapdoor. In the trapdoor, they land in like this weird like moss/plant thing, and Hermione realizes that it's Devil's Snare and that the plants are starting to wrap around them like and choke them a little. And she realizes that Devil's Snare, she remembers from herbology class, hates light, so she summons light, and the plants like and they fall through. In the next room, they walk through to the next room, and there's a door locked on the other side, and they hear wings. When they look up, they see these like tiny birds like flying around in the ceiling, and they can't get through this door. Even Hermione's like unlock door spell doesn't work, so they need a key. And soon they look up and they see metal glinting, and they realize that these aren't birds. The keys have wings, and they're flying around. So obviously, like, something, we need one of these keys. Ron tells Harry that it must be an old key with like a big handle. There are 3 broomsticks just chilling, and each of them grab a broomstick, jump on, and try and chase this key around. It has one wonky wing, so they decide that someone must have already come through. I mean, we've already seen the harp, so someone definitely did. They figure it's Snape. And so they grab this key. Eventually, they're able to grab it. They put it through the door, unlock it, and they go through to the next room. By the way, it's obviously Harry who figured out, who got the key, because he's a seeker. So anyway, in the next room, they see this giant chessboard, and it's full of pieces. Now, Ron says, obviously, this is wizard's chess. Now, I didn't tell you this before because it didn't seem like that big of a deal, and I thought I could tell you now. Basically, Ron is pretty good at this game called wizard's chess, and it's basically just regular chess, but the chess pieces are somewhat alive. And if you, instead of just like taking pieces off the board, it'll break the piece. It's wizard's chess, and chess pieces listen to like their own. So like Harry tried to learn, but he had to borrow someone's chess board, and the chess pieces didn't trust him, and like the chess pieces will try and tell you what to do. So it's like a really hilarious little chess thing, but Ron is very good at it, assigns them positions on the board. Ron takes the knight's place, and he moves them into this game of wizard's chess that he has to win. So they're moving through all the pieces. Ron says, look, in order to win, in order to get Harry to checkmate the king or whatever, I have to sacrifice the knight myself. And so he moves forward, like the chess piece hits him, Ron collapses to the ground, and Harry is able to checkmate the king, and they're through the chess. Ron has been knocked out, but he assured them that they have to go on. So they go to the next room, and they walk through fire, and in the middle of the room, there's this long table with all these potions, and there's a big riddle on it, and Hermione and Harry are both reading it, and before they have to drink one of these potions to get through the fire on the other side of the room into the next room. Hermione reads the riddle and tells Harry, I think it's this potion that we need to drink, and this potion to go backwards. And Harry says, okay, you take the potion to go back and help Ron, and I'll take the potion to go forward and confront Snape. And Hermione's like, are you sure? And Harry's like, yes. There's a really adorable, heartwarming moment where Hermione tells him he's a great wizard because of his bravery and, friendship and all that jazz. So it's very sweet. They each take their respective potion, and Hermione was right. They walk through the fire unharmed. Harry walks into the next room and sees a man standing in front of the Mirror of Erised, and it's not Snape, it's actually Professor Quirrell. And Harry's like, oh, you, Professor Quirrell? And Quirrell's like, me, it was me the whole time. He's very, meh. And Harry's like, I thought it was Severus Snape. And Quirrell's like, ha, yes, like he seems the type, but nope, it was poor stuttering Professor Quirrell. Also, his stutter is fake. Fun facts. He says, Harry's like, but Snape tried to kill me during the Quidditch match. And Quirrell's like, no, I tried to kill you. Snape was doing a counter curse, and when his cloak lit on fire, I got distracted. So that's what happened. And Harry's like, oh, wow. And Quirrell's like, obviously, why do you think he wanted to referee your next match? To make sure that no one messed with you. So we learn that Snape is not as bad as we assumed, even if he's kind of rude. Quirrell tells Harry that it was him who let the troll into the, Hogwarts, because he's actually pretty good with trolls, so of course it was him that did it. He also says that the key to finding the Sorcerer's Stone is in the Mirror of Erised, and Harry thinks he hears this whisper that tells Quirrell to use the boy. So he's looking in the mirror, and Quirrell's like, all I see is me handing the stone to my master, but I don't have the stone. Where is it? And then that voice says, use the boy, and he goes, Harry, come stand here and tell me what you see. and tell me how to find the stone. And Harry's like, I'm not going to. But, like Quirrell's like, come do it. And so he stands in front of the mirror and he's like, I need to find the stone so that Quirrell doesn't find it. And in the mirror, Harry sees himself holding the stone and then sees himself put it into his pocket. And Harry's hand kind of moves toward his pocket and finds that there's a lump there now. So he has the stone. And Quirrell is like, tell me what you see. And Harry's like, I've won the house cup. I am, doing well. And Quirrell's like, liar. He hears like a voice saying, liar. And Quirrell is like reacting to all these things too. And Harry hears a voice saying, let me speak to him. And Quirrell says, Master, you're not strong enough. And Harry's like, what is going on? And the voice says, show me to him. And Quirrell unwraps his turban, and on the back of his bald head is another face. It's Voldemort. See what I have become, the face said, mere shadow and vapor. I have form only when I share another's body. But there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has strengthened me these past weeks. You saw faithful Quirrell drinking it for me in the forest. And once I have the elixir of life, I will be able to create a body of my own. Now, why don't you give me that stone in your pocket? So he knew. The feeling suddenly surged back into Harry's legs. He stumbled backward. Don't be a fool, snarled the face. Better save your own life and join me, or you'll meet the same end as your parents. They died begging me for mercy. Liar, Harry shouted suddenly. Voldemort tells Quirrell to seize Harry, and Quirrell comes at him, like running at him, sees him, Voldemort says. And when Quirrell touches Harry, Quirrell starts yelling in agony, and Quirrell says, Master, I can't hold it in my hands. And Harry looks at Quirrell's hands, and they're like turning gray and blistering. And Harry realizes that for some reason Quirrell can't touch him. So Harry immediately jumps to his feet and shoves his hands onto Quirrell's face. And Quirrell starts to scream and like shrieks, and Voldemort's yelling, kill him, kill him, kill him. And suddenly Quirrell's arm is like wrenched away, and Harry falls down into blackness. Harry wakes up and Dumbledore is standing over him. He says, good afternoon, and he explains what happened. He says basically yeah, you're right. Quirrell got the stone. I realized when I got to the Ministry of Magic that no one needed me there. It was a trick, and I flew back. And you guys did very well getting the stone. And, you did great. And, talks about the stone, tells him all about Nicholas Flamel. They've decided to destroy the Sorcerer's Stone, even though that means Nicholas and his wife will die now. Because they're 600 years old because they were drinking the Sorcerer's Stone elixir or whatever. Harry calls him Voldemort, and he's like, he who must not be named, because everyone is scared. And Dumbledore's like, just call him Voldemort. Always use the proper name of things. Fear of the name increases fear of the thing itself. And he's like, yes, sir. And Dumbledore's like, yeah, Voldemort will probably try to come back, but for now he's been delayed. And he says that he wants to know what's going on, and Dumbledore's like, well, I won't tell you lies, but I don't know if I can tell you all of the truth. And here he says, why couldn't Quirrell touch me? And Dumbledore says, your mother died to save you. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. He didn't realize that love, as powerful as your mother's for you, leaves its own mark. Not a scar, no visible sign. To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever. It is in your very skin. Quirrell, full of hatred, greed, and ambition, sharing his soul with Voldemort, could not touch you for this reason. It was agony to touch a person marked by something so good. So that's why Quirrell was having trouble touching Harry. He also explains that in order for someone to get the stone out of the mirror, Harry had to want to find the stone, but not use the stone. That only someone who wanted to find it, not use it, could have gotten the stone. And Dumbledore's like, wasn't that clever? He has some jelly beans, and Harry realizes that there's been a ton of gifts at his footsteps in the bed, which is super sweet. And he sees his friends, and everyone's doing okay, doing well. And soon he's feeling better, up on his feet, and they have to go to the end of year feast where the house cup is gifted. And this year it will be given to Slytherin because they're ahead in points. In the Great Hall for the feast, there's, banners of Slytherin everywhere. Slytherin is so excited because they've won the House Cup, and they're talking about the number of points everyone has. And Dumbledore says, yes, well done, Slytherin. However, some events must be taken into account. And this is what he says. I'm going to read it because it's cute. Ahem, said Dumbledore. I have a few last-minute points to dish out. Let me see, yes. First, to Mr. Ronald Weasley. Ron went purple in the face. He looked like a radish with a bad sunburn. For the best played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Second, to Miss Hermione Granger for the use of cool logic in the face of fire, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. I'm skipping through some reactions, just by the way. Third, to Mr. Harry Potter, said Dumbledore. The room went deadly quiet. For pure nerve and outstanding courage, I award Gryffindor House 60 points. That is 1 point away from beating Slytherin, and so all of the Gryffindor kids are sitting there. This is just me. All the Gryffindor kids are just sitting there like, oh no, we're 1 point away. Dumbledore raised his hand. The room gradually fell quiet. There are all kinds of courage, said Dumbledore, smiling. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. I therefore award 10 points to Mr. Neville Longbottom, which is so cute. And anyway, Gryffindor is now winner of the House Cup, so Dumbledore claps his hands and all the banners turn into the Gryffindor colors, and Gryffindor table explodes in happiness. And at the end of the year, Harry and all his friends have to take the train home. Hagrid gives Harry a little gift. It is an album that has pictures of all his parents because Hagrid reached out to all of his parents' friends and asked for any pictures of them. Harry is really touched. He gives Hagrid a hug. He is excited to go home, and they're like, hey, aren't you worried about going back home? Because you can't use magic on Dudley, right? And Harry's like, yeah, but Dudley doesn't know that. And it's very adorable and cute. So anyway, he says, I'm not going home because Hogwarts is my home. And that's the end of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Hello and welcome to our analysis of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I've already been talking to you for kind of a long time, so I'm not going to have a super long analysis, but it's also our last episode of season 1, so if this episode runs a little long, my apologies, but I kind of want to get to some, wrap up of our season a little bit as well, so bear with me. I also wanted to not skimp out on the summary of this one because I figured that Harry Potter is such a big, social sensation that I thought this book would be better if I went a little bit more into detail about it and you actually heard more about it. I will say that I watched the movie after I read this book, and the movie and the book are extremely similar. It's actually way more similar than I thought it was going to be. A lot of the dialogue is even the exact same. A lot of the speeches are the same. They basically cut back on some of the singing. They make Dumbledore a bit less crazy, and they kind of cut out some about the dragon stuff and kind of simplify it and just change some of the order of small things. And really, it's almost the exact same. So if you want to watch a movie that's going to tell you the book pretty closely, Harry Potter's actually a pretty good choice. It is pretty similar. I was actually shocked because it came out a long time ago and I thought it would be pretty different, and it wasn't. So I definitely recommend either the movie or the book, or both, because they're both actually really fun. Reading this book reminded me that it was really fun read. It's a sensation because it's simple, it's easy, it's entertaining. The ideas are super original. I mean, Diagon Alley, flying on broomsticks. She invents a whole game. She invents soccer, but for broomsticks. There's snitches and quaffles and all these things. There's ghosts for different houses. I mean, I can easily say that I rarely read books that are this original and its ideas. This woman created her own world that is very impressive because of how different it is and how intense it is. I mean, there's all these different rules. I mean, owls deliver mail. They wear cloaks. There's names for all these spells. It's just, the portraits move. It's very involved, and it's very entertaining and adorable, and it definitely gives you that sense of awe and wonder that are really associated with children's literature and Harry Potter in general, which is why it became such a big deal. People like this book series for a reason, and it's because it's really nostalgic, for me anyway, and it's also full of awe and wonder, so it's adorable. I'm a teeny bit biased because I did grow up with Harry Potter, but it's been a long time since I've read it, and it's definitely pretty cute. Sometimes I think that people go a little overboard in their love for Harry Potter. I don't know if I love it to get a tattoo or to propose to someone in Harry Potter robes, which I've seen happen on the internet. But you know what? For a weekend read, if you want an easy book on a plane, if you want a really cute book that's just very sweet, friendship, magic. This book is 10 out of 10. Definitely recommend. You don't even have to read the full series. Like, if you read the full series, there are like, this book integrates with the full series, but it's also like a full story in one. So if you didn't want to get fully into it, this book would be satisfying to read just as a one-off. So that's my overall impression of the book. Let's get into some analysis, shall we? So analysis-wise, I think this book is done very well. Like I said, it's simple, and in that I mean the writing and both the techniques used are simple but effective. It's like if you go to someone's house and they make you very good scrambled eggs. That's what I assume Harry Potter is. Like, it's not, someone didn't make you beef Wellington, but sometimes people don't make good scrambled eggs. Like, it's nice to have really well done scrambled eggs. This is like if Gordon Ramsay made you scrambled eggs. It's a simple dish, but she uses it to great effectiveness. So what I mean by that is all the names, for example, tell you so much about the character. Each character has like a different cloak they wear that kind of defines their character. So like McGonagall wears emerald, Quirrell wears purple, Snape wears black. It's easy for kids and adults alike to associate those colors with meanings. Gryffindor's red, for example, red and gold. Slytherin is green and black. You can associate basically the feelings of most things with their colors, with their names. There's Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. Those are obviously bad guy names. There's Ron, Harry, and Hermione, who are very simplistic names, very like easy to love characters. Dudley and Dursleys, stuff like that. The tone of the writing is super enjoyable. Stuff like the very first sentence I told you, like, they're normal, thank you very much. Stuff like that. It's fun to read, but she doesn't overdo it, which is good. I think sometimes I think it's a little odd the way that she changes perspective. So it doesn't happen really until Harry does any of his Quidditch stuff. But all of a sudden we get like Hermione and Ron's view, which is okay because this is third person. So we read Harry instead of I. But it's weird because if we're not omniscient most of the time, we don't get Hagrid's point of view or Dumbledore's. We don't get anyone else's perspective. Goodness, sorry. Thank you for sticking with my stuttering. We don't get anyone else's perspective other than Harry's, except when he's doing Quidditch. So yeah, that was a little weird for me. I mean, we have to see them on the ground to see Snape and like Quirrell doing these things and like see Hermione set fire to their cloak and stuff. But I wish maybe she had stepped out of bounds and done other omniscient things if she was going to be omniscient. Omniscience, by the way, in writing means that third person omniscient, you can jump into anyone's head. Then there's third person like based, which is just one person, and it's Harry instead of I, which is first person. And second person is rarely used because it means they say you the whole time, like the reader, so it's a little odd. But by the way, so this is third person omniscient, kind of, and I thought that was a little weird. I also thought it was a little strange. I didn't realize how fast she moves the book along at a really quick rate. I find that some of the imagery and explanations are a bit lost. And I kind of wish we got to know more of those things and got to see more, got to hear more description. Because, for example, I have some things in my head from the movie, and without that, I think that I would have trouble picturing some things. Not trouble per se, but I think she could have added some more imagery. But this is children's literature. She was keeping it simple. I understand where she's coming from. But when you read it, it reminds me of Twilight, where like things move very quickly. And I find that things written for children or things that are written in a simple format tend to move very fast for kind of no reason. It's kind of like a sign to me that the writing is not as developed as it could be, because it's called pacing, how fast the story moves. And if it moves a little too fast, sometimes I'm like, hey, like, this is a good story, slow it down just like 5%. So I wish that this had been like 5% slower so I could get more, like explanation, more description. In a way, I think the movie is almost better at that than she is. For example, Hagrid tells Harry all about his history while at the house with the Dursleys. And I find it hard to believe that the Dursleys would just sit there and be silent for like an hour while Hagrid explains Harry's life story. In the movie, Hagrid tells Harry about it as they get lunch at the Leaky Cauldron, and that almost makes more sense to me. Some of the things that the movie changed, I'm like, yeah, I kind of like that better, because it flows better to just pick him up and then go to the Leaky Cauldron and explain things where Dursleys aren't there, because I found it hard to believe while I was reading. I was like, are the Dursleys really being quiet this whole time? Like, I find that to be weird. And they also stayed there. Like, Hagrid and Harry slept there that night, and I was like, why? Seems weird. But maybe that's just me. Maybe it makes perfect sense to you if you were reading it. Anywho, it was a great book. I really liked it. Some analysis too. So we went over pacing, writing technique. I love the characterization. I find that she uses something that as a writer, you're told not to use a lot. You're told not to use adjectives very often as a writer. And so it's fun for me to read this because she is a very famous writer who uses adjectives a lot. And I'm not saying adjectives as a whole are bad. What most writers are told to avoid, me taking some fiction classes, what you're told to avoid is the she said sadly, he said excitingly, I don't know. So stuff like that where you say he said, she said, and you follow it with an adjective. Rowling doesn't care. She uses it quite a lot, and it's pretty effective, and it makes me understand why this is children's literature, because as a child, if you were to read this, I don't think this is for like 4-year-olds, but I think that maybe like middle schoolers, 5th graders would enjoy this book, understand it, and understand the characters very well because those adjectives are simple. It doesn't feel repetitive, and it's well done. So like I said, it's scrambled eggs. You know, it's simple and easy. There's not too much for me to analyze here. Analytically, I do think that the book does things better in certain ways than the movie does. I'm comparing the two because they're really closely related in my brain, because a lot of people associate them almost to be the same thing. So I wanted to point out some differences. If I had time, I might do like a full episode comparing the movie to the book, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to tell you where the book does things better or differently. So the book, for example, that I noticed that the movie doesn't do at all, really, is the book dives in more to Hagrid's expulsion. At the very beginning, I told you that Hagrid is expelled from Hogwarts and he's not supposed to use magic. Well, several times during the book, we're reminded that Hagrid is not supposed to be doing magic. He isn't even supposed to have his wand anymore. We learn that when you are expelled from Hogwarts, your wand gets destroyed and you are not allowed to use magic anymore. Hagrid tells us that he kept the pieces, and obviously he put them into his little umbrella, and he uses that umbrella for certain small magics because big ones don't work as well when your wand gets broken. We don't learn why Hagrid was expelled. I find it a little hard to believe that Hagrid made it into Hogwarts with him not being like literate, because several times in the story he gives Harry a cake that says happy birthday. Happy is spelled with 2 E's instead of a Y. I find it hard to believe that he got into Hogwarts being not very literate, but maybe they don't care. I don't know. Maybe they expected him to learn. I don't know. Maybe it's just based on talent. I have some questions, but we learn that being expelled is not good at all. It certainly sets the stakes higher, as we're reminded in the book the things that can happen when you're expelled. Like, the risks they take the stakes are so much higher whenever we know this information about Hagrid. Like, it's a little sad, like, they go to Ollivander's, and Ollivander is like, but you don't use your wand anymore, right? And Hagrid, like, clutches his little umbrella, and he's like, no, sir. And it's, like, sad, because we're supposed to feel bad for Hagrid, and we're supposed to not want that for Harry. So certainly I feel the tension more in the book because we emphasize Hagrid's expulsion. I don't remember ever being told why Hagrid was expelled, and we don't learn in this book, but maybe we learn later. I'm not sure. The book also has some nice structure. Each chapter is kind of its own little, like, fully realized, like, scene, you know? So that's nice. And also at the very end, we have structure with there being a challenge for each kid that they're good at that leads them through the challenges. You know, like, Harry has to catch a key on a broomstick. That's very Harry. Ron has to do wizard's chess, so that's, like, a thing he's good at. And Hermione has to do, like, a logic puzzle. In the movie, they kick out that potions scene, and they just let Hermione's, like, talent be figuring out that thing about Devil's Snare, the plants, which is fair because I guess there is kind of 2 challenges for Hermione in that sense, but I kind of liked the potion scene. I don't know why they would remove that. So anyway, it's nice at the end there we have that little structure where each kid has like a thing they're good at. Obviously, in like a real world situation that wouldn't be realistic. But hey, these are 3 kids who go to a school called Hogwarts for witchcraft and wizardry. I'm not really like invested in it being like realistically it would be unlikely that they find like they're good at all the 3 things. Like that's too nitpicky. You just have to be along for the ride. So it was cute that structurally each kid has like a challenge they have to overcome. Lastly, analytically, I wanted to talk about coming of age because this is a coming of age story. It is so interesting that this is a coming of age story because I don't think of it that way because the books that you've read with me throughout this season, coming of age is kind of depressing. A lot of it is realizing that innocence cannot be saved or kept. So throughout the books that we read, the coming of age as they grow older, kids, like their innocence and their like belief and hope for the world is kind of ripped from their eyes, kind of roughly. So there's Life of Pi, Catcher in the Rye, like those things are really depressing. I was looking for something happy to end on that still is though a coming of age story, and Harry Potter works because while it's coming of age, basically the whole series is coming of age. So each book grows with its audience and gets darker and more dramatic. And like the kids kind of lose their innocence like over the course of the series. So their coming of age gets stronger and darker as the series goes on. But this book too, by itself, as a standalone, is still a coming of age story. Harry starts off as a 10-year-old. His life is already not good though. A lot of coming of age stories like they don't have great lives, but they don't have like terrible ones. I'd say Catcher in the Rye is the one where he starts off with already a not very good life and then it just gets worse. Harry has like a not very good life and then he's taken into a magical world where like things are wonderful, but he still kind of gets the wool pulled from his eyes. He gets the wool pulled from his eyes in that not only is the world not how he imagined, because that's part of coming of age is, the world does not work the way I thought it would work. But in this book, it's like cute. It's like, oh, there are wizards. That's the way the world is different than I expected. And then there's the whole Voldemort bit. Voldemort is there to like kind of act as obviously a caricature of evil. And Harry confronts this evil, but he finds that love defeats it. So it's very cute, allegory for love defeating evil always works out. But, he still gets the wool pulled from his eyes. He's still attacked by an evil being when he's literally 11. So he still learns about the world. He learns that destiny has something in store for him that's maybe not good. He learns about the dark things under the world of wizardry that is wonderful. Like, the Great Hall has the bewitched ceiling, but it also has the forbidden forest where unicorns are being slaughtered. So there's a lot of darkness in the book still that's not too dark for youngins. It works well as a coming of age that's not too depressing, so it works well. And that's really all I have to say analytically about Harry Potter. There's more you could dive into if you really wanted to, but for me, Harry Potter's draw and appeal, and the reason why it was so famous is that it kind of works as general, easy, and simple. Like I said, this book really is scrambled eggs. I don't know a lot of people who don't like scrambled eggs. It's a simple dish. Everyone will like it. It's not going to offend you. It's just general, it's just simple and easy. And analytically, she does use a lot of things that are very effective, like names, colors. They're simple. They're used well. And I appreciate it. It's just a fun read. I would definitely read this on an airplane if you've never read it before. If you wanted to like go on like a relaxing vacation, I read this book in about 5 hours. It's really not a hard read or difficult read. So 10 out of 10 recommend if you want like a fun book that's still coming of age. Wait, Jade, did you just put another transition after your analysis? That's normally not what happens. Yes, I did. I don't know if you noticed that. I did because while we're done with our Harry Potter analysis, I kind of wanted to tie up our theme of the entire season so far. I wanted to talk to you about coming of age. Since we're kind of on that theme anyway, we just talked about that with Harry Potter. But this season was about coming of age stories and what tropes are associated with it, what it means. When I got to college, I had never really heard of a story like that before. It's not like a phrase that I heard in high school very often, coming of age. But when I got to college, it was extremely important. Almost every book I read was a coming of age story. And a lot of books that are seen as like historical game changers are like coming of age stories, because I think that they're heavily relatable for the reader. I think every reader can relate to not knowing a full situation and then having to watch someone go through a tough situation and realize an uncomfortable truth, or maybe like watch, their lives be not as good as it could have been or as it used to be. That whole like relatability of losing innocence somehow, some way. I think everyone can relate to that, and everyone can relate to like watching someone learn something. And that's kind of the whole course of a book anyway. If you're ever writing a story, they tell you that your character has to learn something. And a coming of age story is such an easy way to put them in a situation where they learn something. So a lot of books I read were coming of age, and a lot of them like are really important. And like I said, I was in high school. I never even heard that phrase before, coming of age stories, loss of innocence stories. But they're a big deal. They're very influential because they're relatable. And it reminds me of sentimentalism, how women were like, oh, like if I keep it in this frame, I can actually kind of like persuade people without them realizing it. I think coming of age kind of works that way too. And it has so many implications and it can be done so differently. So, for example, I thought one of her more intricate stories was It, in terms of coming of age, because the characters have two coming of ages, one when they're younger and one when they're older, when they have to remember everything that happened to them. So that's a cool use of something like that. Like a writer could sit down and say, I want to do coming of age, but I want to do it different. A story where a kid grows up, sure, and realizes the world isn't what they thought, but maybe like Harry Potter, it's a new world that's both good and bad. Or maybe it's Life of Pi, where he goes through a harrowing ordeal and he's never the same after, but he comes away knowing like what's important to him. And really we learn that event was not what defines him. His life and his choices define him. So I think it's a really interesting and useful like tool. And I think usually it's not even really the whole story coming of age. Coming of age is just a way to introduce topics and themes. So usually themes associated, loss of innocence. There's usually like, I don't know, like loss of parents. Almost all of our people have like a strange connection with their parents, or like a loss in their lifetime they've experienced. These usually stories are not told about kids who have perfect lives either. They don't start off like really, really happy. Not even Romeo and Juliet. Like Romeo, his life is happy, but he starts off like heartbroken about his old love, who I can't remember the name of. So, in Life of Pi, he starts out like a pretty good life, but also like his dad was a zoo instructor. He makes them watch the tigers like attack things. Like it's not really, really good. So it all starts out on the same level. I don't have too much more to say. I just wanted to kind of wrap up our season. I really liked reading books about coming of age, but I'll tell you that if you decide to have a season about coming of age stories, it gets to be a little sad. Coming of age is not always pleasant. Usually you have to go through the mud before you come out on the other side. Sometimes you don't even come out on the other side. Sometimes you're like Catcher in the Rye and you're just put into a mental hospital and you're not really better. So sometimes that happens. If you want to read a coming of age story that's positive, there's wonder, Harry Potter. I'd say Life of Pi is kind of positive. It's a bit more depressing though, because it does get dark in the middle, but at the end he's happy. So that's good. I'm trying to think of other happy ones that we discussed. I'd say The Hate You Give is kind of happy. It's also pretty depressing. Our two books that came away the happiest despite being coming of age, I would say, are Wonder and Harry Potter. If you wanted to dive into coming of age stories that are a bit more based in literature, I'd say Romeo and Juliet, Catcher in the Rye. Catcher in the Rye is probably the one this season that stuck with me the most because I was so surprised by it and I thought it was very well done. And because at heart I like modernist literature, which is literature that tries really hard to like be weird and hard to read. And I like strange things like allusions to old poems that are hidden in the meaning of what he's saying. I like books that are hard to figure out, is what I'm saying. So I enjoyed reading Catcher in the Rye for that reason. I really enjoyed Where the Crawdads Sing as imagery. If you want to go imagery and story, I also really enjoyed Sing, Unburied Sing by Jessamine Ward. We read so many fun books this season, and I really enjoyed a lot of them. I thought they were really fun reads. I thought they were really good to add to my list of books that I read in my lifetime. And just in case you want to read them, you can. And if you don't, you can listen to the podcast. So thank you for sticking with me this season on coming of age stories. It'll probably be a while before I do coming of age again, because like I said, it got a little depressing, especially in the middle, which is why I put in that poem about the girl, because I had to take a break from really sad stories. But next season, I have some spicy stuff. So stick with us. I think you're really going to enjoy next season. I took some of your reactions and some of the highest episodes of this season, and I made my decision based on that. Look out next week for our episode on our updates of what is going to happen for season 2 and what our theme of season 2 is going to be. I'm super excited. I already have all the books picked out. I just need to prepare. So thank you again for sticking with us. Please subscribe and review. Thank you for season 1. Thank you for 1,000 downloads. Thank you so much, lovelies. I'll see you next week for our updates, and then after that, I'll see you for season 2. Thank you so much for supporting Bad Book Club, and goodbye.